Um, okay, so now we will have a show and tell presentation from Professor S. Louisa Wei from City University of Hong Kong. Professor Louisa Wei is a senior associate professor teaching at City University of Hong Kong. She's also an award-winning writer, a documentary filmmaker, and a member of Hong Kong Director's Guide. Her documentaries include Golden Gate Girls, Havana Divas, and Alive in 6 Chapters. She has researched widely on women directors and writers in Sinophone and early cinemas. So Professor Wei, I will make you a panelist. And be prepared to share your screen and turn on your camera. Okay, yeah, we can see you. Please unmute yours. Okay, yeah.
Hi, good morning and good evening. I guess because I make a short film, and then so I was supposed to do show and tell, and maybe I'll just do the show, and then we could have a discussion, because I think the short film I'm going to show tackles into the many issues of the first panel. Okay. So let me share my screen. Oh gosh, you can't see that, right?
No, we can just hear the audio.
Yes, because it's somehow.
Oh yeah, we can see your now.
1920年代的上海，3个受过教育的摩登女性，踏入起步不久的电影工业，开始了她们的历险。1923年，4名洋行的英文打字员王汉伦被明星电影公司的张石川和郑振秋启用，开拍明星首部剧情长片《孤儿救祖记》。虽从未学过表演，王汉伦却能够从自身经历出发，体会角色。他塑造的少奶奶于蔚如，聪慧贤良，心怀大爱。影片上映后，感动了众多观众，让濒临倒闭的明星公司起死回生。明星公司趁热打铁，让王汉伦继续主演了《欲离魂》和《苦儿弱女》2部悲剧，再获成功。
Like, yes, I open the chat, and then so you can ask me a question at any time. I guess the film says a lot about itself, and the reason I made this film was like, you know, when we're doing research and we're focusing on one name, we would usually just like searching for that one name and forget about the background of China and what kind of environment that these filmmakers were in. And this was also that because of like movie stars, they often existed in images, and then you know, they don't speak for themselves very much. When they were interviewed, it was like through the remediation of reporters, and so they got forgotten. Like women's own voice were forgotten most of the time when we're writing film history, except for like you know, a few biographers who are very interested and who really understand how difficult it was for for women to work at that time. So I want to thank April for like also co-wrote part of the script. I have like 3 co-writing young professional, like a young film scholars who are also women, because we want to make this an effort that we're going to like rewrite these women back into Chinese film history and also world film history together. Yeah. Any questions for me? I guess we still have like 11 minutes in this. The Swanee River was a tune that was played in Shanghai all the time. It was popular. All these folk songs and church songs and all these music, we did our research. We don't randomly pick a music. So Paul, does that answer your question? You'll be amazed like how many like Canadian songs and also American songs were already playing from the 1910s to the 1920s. And all these women have a background that, you know, they all sort of went to universities, that went to secondary school, like Wang Hanlun was from St. Mary's. So that was like a missionary school. And then they got to listen to lots of folk songs from even the 19th century. And there's also like jazz bands in Shanghai as well, because of the foreign residents there. And then all these songs we actually picked from the record that was being played in Shanghai all the time. Yes, like, you know, the reason I made these 3 women into the same film was because it seems that women had a breakthrough like around the mid 1920s. So Wang Hanlun was actually the person who inspired Yang Naimei to become an actress. So Wang Hanlun played the role in The Orphan Saves Grandpa. And her second film, and Yang Naimei already joined as a supporting actress after like Yang Naimei watched Wang Hanlun in her film. And then when Wang Hanlun was playing the role in All the World Against Her, or The Abandoned Woman by Hou Yao, and Pu Shunqing was a supporting actress in that, playing Wang Hanlun's maid in the film. And then at the same time, and then there was also another actress, and Pearl Ing. And Pearl Ing, she was actually the first woman to play a leading role, but because she stopped after playing one movie for a few years, she didn't reach the movie star status yet. So when Wang Hanlun showed up the year after Pearl Ing, and then she quickly became the biggest star. And in 1925, Pearl Ing also came back to play leading stars in movies. And at this time, one of her supporting actresses was Xie Caizhen. And Xie Caizhen was playing quite a few. I think she got 5 or 6 at least supporting roles in film, and her acting skill was praised, but she couldn't play the female lead. I think one of the reasons was maybe people didn't think like she was beautiful enough, or maybe because she didn't have like a film producer, like a usually male, or a husband who's the producer who supported her that much. And this is why, like, I think this might be one of the reasons that she got the role of a director, and then so she could play the female lead in Orphan's Cry. Yeah. Well, like, how would I add these women back into the history? Like, we write about who, I published recently. I published a journal paper in Chinese on Xie Caizhen exclusively, and then they in a Beijing Film Academy journal. And I had exchanges with the editors, and then they were like, you know, how do you find these materials? They seems to be very scattered, and how do you interpret certain things? And I actually got lots of inspirations from Women Film Pioneer Project hosted by Columbia University on how to interpret these historical materials and how to pick like small leads from the articles, which may not be the key point of the news. And to, in order to do this, you need like cross-reference from all the other women. This is why like, I think women should be presented as a group. And of course, they can't be isolated from the male directors who directed them. And but then the working environment is something that everybody share. Like Wang Hanlun was not getting paid, and then she only got paid for like bursary, like transportation, but not get paid the promised salary after the film was released. And even a big film star like Butterfly Hu, the Hu Die, she has the same problem. She complained, so that you would know that Wang Hanlun was just not just complaining out of her own, because somebody else has the same problem. So when we're writing women, we should make as many cross-reference to other women's case to make the whole case strong, to build this case. And otherwise, we don't have a case. If we just single out like a single, a single profession, like an actress or a director, and if we take this out of context, it doesn't make sense. It cannot persuade the audience and say, okay, this whole phenomenon existed. And question from Nadia. Yes, Chongqing, you're right. Chongqing did not become like a center of making films, even after Japan occupied Shanghai and the government moved to Chongqing. And I read articles about a woman and whose name is Huang. Sorry, I just like it escaped my mind. But her surname was Huang, and then she was working in Chongqing, and when the Shanghai movie director Wan Lai Tian came to Chongqing, and she learned from him, and because she has an ambition to make a film, and she had two sisters, so there were like three Huang sisters. They made a movie together, and but then Sichuan was like very backward. It didn't have a film industry, it didn't have the equipment, and during a war, it's very expensive and it's almost impossible to get the equipment to like restart a film, like a film studio in Sichuan. And after a few years, like Japan and the Shanghai industry, they kind of reached to an agreement. Then they were setting up some independent companies, and eventually around 1941, they reunited into a big corporation called Huaying, and then they were making movies. And these movies, of course, they have to consider the sentiment of the Chinese audience. So you cannot just make like a propaganda film. This is why like actress like Li Xianglan would hide her real identity as a Japanese person to go on. But these were like, mostly the the situation of the 1940s. And my film was because they were like the first ladies. So they all came up in the 1920s. 1920s, there was like a loss of freedom as in the 1920s because the leftist influence hasn't come in yet. So ideologically, you cannot say there is a major trend in ideological issues. So the movies dealing with women are like really dealing with women's situation of the women problems, which are more universal, that you would see similar films from Hollywood doing the same, the marriage, the work, and then, but it's not towards that, everybody was making their like life more meaningful in, like Jin Chen talked about the Aisha's case and Aisha's struggle, like, she has her own image of the new women, but then, and also like, April also talked about the audience confuse the actresses with their role, and Jin Chen talked about this also. In the 1920s, the audience were fresh with Chinese movies. Everybody working in Chinese movies were actually counting on the actresses for the movie success because the actresses were rare and people want to see them. And so that's why, like, mostly it's the actresses got first billing roles. Old folks. I see. Okay, what's the role of media in general? And movie came around in the 1910s, but women only start to play female roles from 1920, 21, 22, starting with Pearl Ing and a couple of other actresses. And so, but the magazines also started from, the 1910s. And because girls all started to go to school, like only girls from the middle class or higher class families, they attended the girls' school, so they could read. And then so later on, there will be like a, Linglong magazine targeting for women, or women's magazine targeting for them. And also Liang You, of course, and all these magazines, and they were targeting at a women audience, but most of these magazines were edited by men. And so media played a role, like it depends on which media. Some media are like more advanced in the recognition of women and their issues, some are not. And so there are lots of like a gossip magazines, and they keep talking about like, when Wang Hanlun was still 28, 29, they were talking about, oh, she's not so young anymore. And then they were using 人老珠黄, like you're a withered flower, like all the time on Wang Hanlun, on Yang Naimei. So overall, it's pretty negative. But then they are also voices can be heard that actually spoken for these women. So these are like, I hope this quick summary give you an idea of the media at the time. So that's it for this panel. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Professor Wei, and we will see you later in the interview. Okay. So now we will have a screening of Dr. Qing Li's film called Blue Sky Station, 8th Avenue, New York's third Chinatown. And
go back to New York after sitting down in Beijing. So in your memory, during the past decades, what has changed and what has not?
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me here. It's an interesting question. Actually, consider this movie was made like 22 years ago. I'm not sure if the viewers still, feel the changes here, there or not. I would like to hear from you guys. But for me,
personally,
yeah, for me
I
personally,
see the subway station, I see the market. It is exactly what I see in the Chinatown now. So for me, it's very interesting. I think for me, from some perspectives, during the 2 decades, New York has not changed much compared with the change in China and like in Beijing, which city you are lived in. It's my perspective, but we will have more audience feedback in the Q&A, and they will share their experience in watching the film. Must be very interesting.
yeah, I totally agree with that, because when you ask me what's the change in New York, honestly, I didn't feel a lot of change. As you said, I graduated from Columbia and I worked in New York City for like over 7 years before I decided to return to Beijing. Now I'm in Beijing because it's night here. But, I still go back and forth. And every time I went there, I feel just easy and relaxed because, and also you didn't feel any change. The airport, the buildings along the street, lifestyles are still the same. And yes, in the Blue Sky Station, the movie you just watched, there's a man who sells vegetables on Canal Street of Manhattan, Chinatown. Every time I go back to New York, to Chinatown, I can still see him. He still sells almost the same kinds of vegetables at the same spot. So I guess this is the life. You repeat, but it's continuing. It's going on. So like my feelings and connections with New York remain the same. But as you ask for change, I see there is an obvious change, and is that you can see more young Asian faces, in the street, not only around the Chinatown area, but obviously it's around the Chinatown restaurant areas, but there are more like the new overseas students from China like you. So there are more young Chinese in Columbia University's the campus too. Which reminded me at the time I came to the same campus on the very hot summer of 1999. I was told that I was the first Chinese student who was admitted to Columbia University's journalism school, directly from the Chinese mainland. So during my study in the JS school, I was the only Chinese student. There were a few Asian students, but I was only Chinese. And so, yeah, there's a lot of change. I think as for the film, it was produced like 22 years ago. Technically, it's not as fancy as today's, but many issues we discuss in the film remain the same. I think this can be another, unchanged. And it links to our today's discussion, I think.
So interesting. And we know your documentary was not public released online before, and we are so honored to witness the copy to be digitalized. Before getting the copy from you, we attempted to access the copy from the Columbia Journalism Library, and they say, yes, we do have the copy, but you cannot watch it until it becomes digitalized. However, we need to spend 2 months to digitalize the copy. So we are so interested in which kind of camera you rely on to make this documentary, and you leave which type of copy in the Columbia Journalism Library. We are so
actually, I just found the tape. Oh. Here's the tape. Actually, this is the original tape. It's so big, right? I found this one, so it's very difficult to transform this one to a digital one. Can you see it? It's the original one. Yeah. I don't know. Is that okay? But anyway, this is huge, and I should say we were very lucky. We were very lucky because we were the first class in the history of Columbia Journalism School to use the digital video camera. At that time, it's the first. Columbia only they just bought 5 DV cameras, and that's why. Although it's a new 5 DV cameras. Otherwise, we have 50 students studying broadcasting that year. So only 5 graduate project design proposals could reach the final list of making documentaries. my proposal about the blue sky sketching was luckily to make the final list. This means that I could use the new digital video camera, and I so invited 2 classmates to join me as a team, and they were all very excited. Yes, the DV camera we used for the blue sky station was portable. Yes, portable, but compared with the machine we had today, it's very heavy and big, and the battery is huge as well. And also the editing machine, the editing system, because we have a DV camera, but the editing system at that time in Columbia Journalism School was still the old linear. The linear editing system is not a non-linear, So I heard about the non-linear editing system, it was introduced to the school the year after we graduated. So, but our tape was great, it's a DV tape. So we transformed our mini DV, so when we edited it, to the video cassette, we called it the Betacam, and also in our, we call this 3/4. So I remember I have some photos taken about, we carry the cameras and also the editing system. If you have time, I will show you later, or maybe I found a picture I sent to you. But it's much difficult and inconvenient compared to this editing system. So if we mess up with one picture, we might need to redo the whole things, all over again. It's almost impossible to insert a new clip if you forgot it in the first place. So that we must have a very clear and detailed editing plan, all written heavy papers, detailed to every shot and every words of narrations. And yours, because if you have to redo again, or you keep some part of it and you redo another part, you will worry about losing resolutions, the picture qualities. So you can imagine how exhausting the editing work can be. So plus
exactly.
And also you have the DDL, deadlines. So after I remember we spent like weeks there, and after spending the last 2 days without sleep, we finally finished our final cut and went home. But we were so excited after finish, and I remember when I woke up in the morning, I heard the voicemail that was from my, our advisor, Scotty Williamson, and I remember her message was so thrilled. She says, "Excellent, excellent, excellent." She says, "Excellent," and I know she was, always very encouraging. But this time, I can tell she was really proud of us, and that's the part to share with the older machines.
Yeah, so as you share, it's such a wonderful story, and you are always focused on the new media, right? Actually, we first know you because one of our cohorts cited your book, Immersive Communication, in her master's thesis about Netflix. And as you point out that communication today has moved beyond the bidirectional mass communication of the second media age to the ubiquitous immersive communication in the third media age. So would you mind sharing your thoughts on the production and the communication of the documentaries in the third media age? Any difference with those in the second media age?
Oh, sure. Yeah, please say hello to your friends who cited my book. Sure. I'm glad that the book has helped he or she or her, or her or him.
Her.
Okay, helped her. Yeah, and this is because actually my life have changed quite a lot after I graduated from Columbia, and I did the documentaries, and also I do some postings, and finally, actually now I'm doing my whole focus was in research, communication research, and teaching. because I think this really make me feel something I was meant to do. So as you point out that the immersive communication is the one I have been researched for years. When I mentioned the third media age, you know that the second media age originally proposed by the Mark Post in 1995, and he described an age of two-way decentralized communication. So when I proposed the concept of the third media age in 2013, 10 years ago, almost 10 years, yes, I referred to the third media age as immersive, ubiquitous mass communication area. So this era that immersive communication blur the boundaries between the physical world and the virtual world. And that's, it can produce a state of immersion. The ubiquitous technologies enables human beings present anytime and anywhere, and extended immersive communication from the remote to ubiquitous is part of my innovation. And also I think, because you asked me how the production and communication of documentary in the third media age will be different from the one before, right? The age before. To be honest, when I construct my communications theory, I didn't really think about it, documentary. But yes, yes, in the third media era, the mode of information, like the dissemination and receptions, right? We send out and we receive has been completely changed. And as I already said in the book, everything is media, including human beings and including our whole big environment. So in the meantime, all people are both users and creators. So I will say that in the third media age will be like a crowd collaboration of documentary productions. And you can see that just in the third media age, the film will be immersive 360-degree VR panorama. So the director do not need to choose which part of the scene you will be filmed or you'll be present, because you should present everything and allow the audience to explore by themselves, right? So the VR film shoot scene is different from traditional film as well, from traditional film and television shootings. And the whole crew need to hide as much as possible because there is no dead angle for the 360-degree cameras. So VR, when you have VR at a 360-degree, that means you can't edit in it. The film you shoot it cannot be edited. No can use some other means to remedy it. So if there's any defect, you will have to redo it. And I think also the most important difference is that the narrative technique has also changed. The one in the third media should be the first person perspective. The user is also the creator. It is more like you play a VR games, and it can also be a live broadcasting as well. I think this might answer some of your questions.
Yes, wonderful answer. Actually, I have a question that now we often communicate with each other with the emoji, and in Chinese it's 表情包. Is that a typical character in the third media age, in your opinion?
I can see that's the typical one, because that one is just part of it's still a one-way communication, right? But it's picture size. I would say that the one, maybe we talk about the avatar, your digitalize yourself should be the one as a main form of media. So the human beings will be part of the whole media communications, and but the facial reaction is important, very important. That's a real one, not an emoji or something.
Yeah, so interesting. Actually, we know uh, translation between different language is not always possible. So there are many untranslatable parts in every culture. And so people who like you could speak fluent English and Chinese are very critical for cross-cultural communication. And we know you worked for both Chinese media and United States media. So we are very interested in how your language background helps the cross-cultural communication between different countries and to yes, we know that your book immersive communication first comes out in Chinese, and then 2020 it was translated into English, or you rewrite it in English, and now even my Korean cohort can cite this book, and she was so impressed by your thoughts in that book. So may I invite you to share your experience in your cross-cultural communication and scholar work?
Yeah, and you mentioned like language. I think language is the basic for communications, especially when you are in the cross-cultural area. And when we present in the film, that we have a part especially discuss about the language barriers, the new immigrant when they come to a place. Because the language barriers, a lot of their huge dream was shattered because you can't even speak out about what you want. And you can't communicate with people. But because you asked about culture, I think culture is more than language. Culture is like a social behavior and the norms, right? We found in the human society. So more commonly, definition is that culture refers to a behavior and belief that learned it and shared. So I think the most important part is learned it and shared. Because it's learned, so it's not like instinctual. It's not like you're born with it, instinctual. And because it's shared, so it's not individual. So it's owned, it's understood and honored by a lot of people. So I think that is culture. And so when we talk about communication, cross culture, or now we say trans culture, transnational, or something like that, right? It means there's some barriers, there's some thing you need to overcome, and you need to have a same understand, or at least you if I don't agree with you, I understand what you're trying to tell me and what you're trying to do, and that as the best for any communications. But it's hard. It's hard. I really remember because this movie the Blue Sky, I haven't watched it for like 20 years as well. But when I watch it today, it also remind me when we do the screening. When we do the screening, we did some screening to the Chinese community and also to know the non-Chinese audience as well. So there's a part, I'm not sure you remember, the husband bought a new bed, right? Because at first when they're married, they have only one single bed. They bought a new bed, and he was so excited. He almost jumped into the bed and showed how comfortable the mattress is. And when I show this to the Chinese community, they're not this, they just feel a little bit sad and things like, understand. But in the Western, like the other communities, there's a huge laugh. They think this is funny, So that's why it's different culture background. We even for the same thing, we have different perspectives and we react differently. Like when you do some joking, maybe I didn't get it, or maybe because I didn't really understand the background behind it. So the background, the sense, that something unseen, unsaid is a difficult part for us to understand.
Got it.
And also the part we should, focus.
Difference is it's very hard we can go over it, that there are so many challenges for like people like us that we use English as a working language, working in another country that not China. So yeah, I learned more about the real situation about the working in United States from the story you are sharing, and I guess many of our audience can learn from it. Yeah. So we have a last question before we leave the time for the audience. It's about teaching. As you mentioned that during the past decades, you could see more Asian faces in Colombia and in other United States universities. So we know you have abundant teaching experience in both the United States and China. And we know you are teaching classes about practice and theories about journalism and global communication at Renmin University now. So we wonder if you have found any difference between different generations of students, or the difference influence the research work or journalism practice in the future, in your opinion?
Yes, now I'm teaching in the Renmin University of China, and I teach like international communication and global communication, and also international journalism. Yes, I think the major part about the teaching is like you need to understand your student, because as I said, globalization, the human integrations, and we are all immigrant. We are all migrant, and in the campus it's same. We have international students as well. Now they come to China to learn, and also we have Chinese students, and I think okay, it's okay. I think time is up. I have something to do, but what I remind like the students of these generations, like they will grow up in the information age, and they have a broader visions, than the former students. And because I think you want to ask me about maybe the film skills. I taught one class about doing on-camera interview and small documentaries, short films, and I think they master technology very fast. And this generation like to play like TikTok, and they're familiar with all kinds of video editing software applications on the mobile phones, but besides these technologies, I think they want to really understand the world, what's behind, because they're surfing the internet every day, and they want to know, are we looks like we're on the same page, are we saying the same language? And I always ask them how you understand, the meanings behind the word, and I think they will have their own thoughts and are quite creative journalists to be in these generations.
So interesting. So from the chat, we know the audience are so interested in your documentary. Paul wants to purchase your copy, and Angelina wants you to share what inspired you to make this documentary.
Oh, thanks, Paul and Angelina. Angelina, yeah, thanks, Paul and Angelina. Yes, and what inspired me to do this, because at that time I was a new immigrant. I just arrived in New York, and there's a lot of things going on in my mind that I don't really understand. And also, I want to understand why people come to the USA, because I have a simple purpose to study, but why they come to Chinatown, right? Why they want to spend their life in a different countries. So I think when I look at Chinatown, at first I want to say, okay, Chinatown is maybe it's a new home far away from another home, for some immigrant. But when I look inside, I I can found that for the first generation, it is more like a place for making a living. And it's not an easy one. And that's why I think I want to, for some part, I want to help them to come up better solutions. I think that's too hard for me at that moment. But I think I have that kind of visions to see if I can help them. But I think at least understand them and let people understand what's going on there, their language barriers, and also their, like the self-identities, who are they, who are their children will be, and, what kind of life and what kind of living conditions. They're not expected. A lot of them are not prepared for the place they arrived, but they're fighting. They're doing their best. I think I just get some connection with them, and I spent almost the whole Columbia study time in that area, the 8th Avenue. At that time, it's only like 10 blocks. Right? I really hope someday I hope I can revisit the families we filmed. I hope they are doing well.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's so interesting to know the story behind the documentary. Yeah, it's so interesting. And it seems like we have time limit. We have finished because we don't have much time. We appreciate Professor Lee because she has morning class tomorrow. So it is not easy for her to talk with us at midnight. We appreciate Professor Lee. Thank you so much. And we learned so much from you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, and thank you all the audience, and thanks for watching. And I would like to hear more from you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so now we will have a roundtable, an interview with Professor Louisa Wei, who just showed her film and did a discussion